The time is at hand.
The elusive dog-like creature attacks livestock, bleeding them dry of blood.
8 to 10 feet tall, shadowy aliens.
The appearance of a mysterious monolith.
Making it rain by zapping clouds.
And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Babylon the Great is fallen, is fallen.
Welcome to In Dark Places. I'm your Huckleberry, Junebug Fugit. Did you get to see the Northern Lights? I got to see them this time. Me and Brandon were out running the roads like always, and we saw the Northern Lights right as they were fading away. We got to see it for about an hour though. It was pretty neat. Too bad it's just climate change on the sun causing that. Gotta really get those guys some electric cars. Alleged UFO whistleblower offers bizarre alien invasion prediction by TK Randall. Thanks, TK. A man who says he has extensive insider knowledge has been making some rather questionable claims. According to reports, Charles McNeil, allegedly a U.S. Air Force intelligence insider, has put forward the bizarre claim that he was once recruited to join a top-secret unit tasked with maintaining a 70-year truce between the government of the United States and some sort of alien civilization. He also maintains that this truce is supposedly about to come to an end, leading to what he describes as a series of dramatic events. These will allegedly include some sort of global conflict as well as a staged alien invasion that will make use of reverse-engineered UFO technology. It doesn't stop there either, as McNeil also claims that an effort to slowly expose humanity to the reality of extraterrestrial visitation has been playing out for decades in the form of movies, books, and television shows about alien invasions and various other science fiction scenarios. This is known as the Public Acclamation Program. He said, "For decades you have been force-fed a fictionalized version of the truth via TV, movies, and books," he said. McNeil has even offered a description of the various alien races that he claims will be invading us. Type A through C have a gray or grayish pigmentation that can come off a bit chalky sometimes, he said. They have 4 fingers with little suction cups on the ends of each finger, and some have webbing in between their fingers and toes. Type D have a brownish pigmentation and 5 fingers and 5 toes. This species started off fully biological until they ventured out into the cosmos and came into contact with what they now answer to, something called the Keeper. And now they worship technology and started to incorporate mechanics into their biological makeup thousands of years ago. Suffice it to say, it would probably be best to take these claims with a very large pinch of salt indeed. I don't know, I've got your back, Charles. That's how they're planning on explaining the rapture when millions of people disappear. They're going to say the aliens did it. And now here is your Nicolas Cage meltdown of the week. I've been looking forward to that one. I saw that in the theater a couple months ago. Couldn't wait for it to come out on DVD. Nicolas Cage is a nut. That was supposed to be a horror movie by the name of Long Legs. And Nicolas Cage was just so over-the-top crazy in that movie. No one in the theater was afraid during the movie. Everyone was just cracking up. This week on the show, a UFO whistleblower that you may not have heard of. Unless you've been living under a rock these last few years, you're probably aware of the little disclosure movement that's happening right now, with people like David Grush and guys like that coming forward and telling what information they know about UFOs. And they're basically telling us stuff that we already knew, but it's still pretty cool that it's making the news and stuff. Here's a pretty interesting story I found on Reddit. Please note that I will be vague in some places about identifying information, credentials, locations, people, procedures, etc. I don't want to be identified and harassed. I have a professional background in anthropology. I also have some informal experience in philosophy, which unexpectedly ended up being the most useful of my skills on this project. Previously, I worked for a university in the western United States. For cultural reasons, students and faculty at this particular university are more likely to be selected for sensitive government work. I suspect that I was selected because of my low profile, my squeaky clean history, a lack of any drug or alcohol use, my broad range of skills and knowledge related to human civilization, and some connections that I have in academia. My most significant work has been in ethnography, never heard of that, and cultural anthropology. Why Reddit? I'm sure you're wondering why I'm posting this here instead of sending this information somewhere more important. Since the UFO hearing happened and other whistleblowers have come forward, I felt safe enough to speak out privately. I don't know how useful my testimony was, and I felt like I was brushed off. As I'll get into later, I don't have any documents to hand over or any first-hand experience with UFOs or ETs. I do have trust in our institutions to do their job, come to the right conclusions, and eventually begin disclosure. I have hope that the truth will be widely known in the near future. I wasn't interested in or involved in the UFO alien phenomenon prior to starting my work. As the work progressed, I became convinced that there was something very real behind all this, and now that I'm released from the project, ufology has become a special interest of mine. I think now is a good time to put my story out there. The work. In early 2017, I was contacted by one of my connections at the university who urged.
I've got the urge.
She's got the urge to burble. She ran the rebel in the
Never gets old. Me to apply for a position in a special research project, claiming that the project needed someone with my experience. The pay would be good, and that they would help me get in. This individual helped me apply and gave me a rundown about what to expect from the hiring process. This process involved an extensive background check, applying for a security clearance, several interviews, and training for security, communication, and working with sensitive information. Going through the rat maze took several months, but I made it through much faster than anticipated, and was finally ready to actually begin working in early 2018. I was apprehensive on my first day of work. I had jumped through all the hoops and still didn't know what the subject of the research was. I didn't feel comfortable with all the security. I'm on the spectrum, and while I'm good at masking, procedures and bureaucracy make me confused and nervous. The workday began by entering a secure facility where my identity was verified with ID and biometrics. After passing through, I would go to my workplace and have to pass through another layer of security. In the workspace, where we were monitored constantly and subject to random security checks. The workspace was a medium-sized set of offices where I and 6 other researchers worked, one of which was assigned to train me. Each of these researchers had different backgrounds and were assigned to a different part of the project. Over the next few days, my trainer walked me through the research process. It was then when I finally learned what the subject of the research was. My trainer greatly explained that we were working with information about exotic intelligence, meaning sapient non-human species of an unknown origin. Our job was to take the information that had been provided for us from outside sources, set it on its own content and usefulness, and in the end produce a comprehensive report that summarized what we knew about this intelligence, with a special focus on its motivations and intentions. This report could then be used to brief elected officials in the future, and even the public. We were allowed to make certain assumptions in the report, such as these beings and their motivations could be understood by humans, and that the information we have is accurate. I had endless questions and became distraught, and I think they could tell me because my trainer figured it would be best if I was given time to myself to read some of this material and digest the information. As I learned more, the shock faded and my fear was replaced with curiosity. A lot of the work wouldn't be interesting to the members of this sub. The average workday consisted of going through security, getting permission to retrieve certain documents, then organizing and annotating the documents. Much of the documents were only related to subject in tangential ways and didn't convey much of use. In a sense, we were separating the wheat from the chaff and getting the material ready to be used for the project. After finishing, we would secure the workplace and leave. Over the months that followed, we slowly built up a corpus of useful information. I obviously do not have the report with me, and it has been a while, but I will now relate to you the most important information that I can recall related to these beings. Note that I worked the most on information related to the society and motivations. Origins. We know more about every other aspect of these beings than we do about where they actually come from. We do have some tentative ideas and speculation, but multiple hypotheses are still on the table. As I'll get into later, there is good evidence that life on Earth and these beings share a common ancestor. Our job is to keep an open mind and to let the evidence lead the way instead of falling for our own pet theories or cultural prejudice. The extraterrestrial hypothesis makes some sense, but is not the only option. During work, my colleagues often called them aliens or ETs. In interviews I've read, the interview subjects are vague, absurd, contradictory, or evasive when asked about their origins. Perhaps it is because we aren't in a position to understand where they come from, or perhaps there are problems with the communication. Maybe they simply don't want to know us. Appearance and biology. In regards to the appearance of the ETs, UFO mythology is dead on. Generally, they look like diminutive humanoids with large heads, reduced facial features, and very large eyes, which are sometimes covered in a transparent black film. Earlier specimens usually do not have the film, later specimens do. The average height is about 5 feet tall. They have long arms and 2 legs. They have 3 fingers and an opposable thumb. They have feet with 4 toes. They may have fingernails and toenails, but not always. When they do, they are molted and dark. They have no reproductive organs or anus, and they secrete waste through their skin, similar to how we sweat. They ingest food like we do. They wear clothing, usually in the form of very thin blue or gray high-collared garment, as well as boots. They're hipsters. Their heads are large, as mentioned before. In some individuals, there are pronounced ridges on the head and upper back, which seem to relate to different kinds of implants in a way that is not understood. As far as I can tell, every individual has an artificial lattice woven through their brain and nervous system. I'll get into that later. No 2 individuals are alike. Head shape, eye shape, and size. The patterns and protrusion of the ridges and skin color vary between individuals. Life on Earth and ETs share the same kind of biochemistry. They are made of cells, use DNA, proteins, etc. They can be studied and understood with the same principles that we use to study life on Earth. This has fed into speculation about their origins. The most conservative hypothesis is that they share our biochemistry, because they also originate from Earth. But there are other theories. Life on Earth and wherever they come from could both be descended from a common ancestor. Perhaps everywhere in the universe shares the same biochemistry. The striking similarities between their anatomy and human anatomy leads me to wild speculation about whether the individuals we see are specifically designed to resemble humans in order to facilitate interaction. They're time travelers. There is a small collection of biological material that has been retrieved from craft that shares no resemblance to humans and defies description. This material is like a web of nervous tissue, which is interlaced into the structure of the craft itself. Technology. Before, I mentioned an artificial lattice, which is integrated into the nervous system. This lattice is at the heart of their technology. In interviews with subjects, they demonstrated the ability to communicate with and detect the presence of others of their kind in the same facility in different rooms. Tools retrieved from the craft would be responsible to the touch and intentions of the ETs, but would be totally inert in the hands of human operators. This lattice is probably what makes these abilities possible. It is made of ordinary elements like copper and aluminum, and there is no discernible reason why it should be able to do what it seems to do. We were allowed access to documents that describe the capabilities of their craft, as well as eyewitness encounters, but we were not allowed any data that would explain how their propulsion systems work, or about anything regarding the reverse engineering of the craft. The reasoning behind this is obvious. The special interests involved have begrudgingly begun to accept that disclosing the existence of the intelligence is necessary over the long term. But the one thing they refuse to do is relinquish their monopoly over exotic technology. I don't have much insight to give about the craft because the project focused more on the extraterrestrials themselves, their societies, and implications for our society. The craft have a wide range of appearance, size, and behavior. It seems like each craft is designed for a specific purpose. Each craft is different, but they can be grouped based on shape and purpose. There are some edge cases that won't fit into this neat categorization. There are hundreds of objects in orbit that are likely created by this intelligence. At first glance they look like commonplace space debris, but on rare occasions they will move in a way that is not attributable to gravity, meet with another object, or expel an object. Tracking these is very difficult, and we know very little about them, including their size. The most commonly seen objects are large reflective orbs or peels that move at high speeds. Usually they are only seen for a second, but on other occasions they follow aircraft, hover over sensitive locations, move in strange, illogical ways, and even suddenly disappear. At night these orbs sometimes emit orange light, although other colors can also be seen. These objects have been seen submerging into the ocean, as well as other bodies of water. There are egg-shaped craft which move in more predictable ways. Although they move much faster than man-made aircraft, we were allowed to have a lot of information related to these. These craft are most likely to fail, and they are manned. Biological material and even living organisms have been recovered from these craft. These are most interesting to me, as they contain occupants, living spaces, and large rooms full of equipment. We speculate that these are surveyors or scientists. In one particular case, a craft of this kind contains samples of Earth biota. There are no control panels or any kind of obvious mechanism for controlling the craft. This kind of craft has unfortunately become more uncommon over time. The classic flying discs and crescents have the greatest presence in popular culture, but they are not the most common object. These are speculated to be stealth vehicles that are used for reconnaissance and research. On many occasions, these have landed completely empty. The interviews. Because of my past work experience, most of my work on the report was related to actual interviews that had taken place with ETs. They were retrieved from crashes, but also from landings, where the craft seemed to have landed on purpose, and the being came voluntarily. Reading these was very surreal, and I suspect the context of these interviews is part of the reason for so much secrecy. The way that they were treated was inhumane and very unethical. The ETs have a very close relationship with their technology. They cannot survive very long while separated from their craft and from each other. They can't eat anything other than a special kind of liquid food, and human-made substitutes were not sufficient replacements. Throughout their stay on Earth, they would suffer from malnutrition and a kind of toxic buildup in the body. Because of how valuable they were, every effort was taken to keep them alive and conscious, even against their wishes. The situation reminded me of the case of Hisashi Ochi. I don't know anything about that case. Something that deeply frustrated me was that they seemed to want to show us so much more, but because of the irresponsible behavior of the program, they could not. They were separated from their craft permanently, so the craft would be hauled off elsewhere and auctioned off, and so that the program would have total control over the interview process. Because of this separation, the ETs would slowly die. Communication took place through telepathy. They can read our thoughts and send thoughts and impressions into our minds. However, this takes a lot of concentration on the part of the interviewer, and communication would break down as the health and consciousness of the subject declined. The interviewer and the ET would communicate telepathically, then the interviewer would say the exchange out loud for it to be recorded. Society and motivations. From reading interviews with detained subjects, I and other researchers were able to put together a rough picture of how this species works and why they are here. Instead of having any kind of formal social structure, these beings form a dynamic superintelligence that is a composite of all their minds. Reproduction doesn't take place biologically. Instead, they are artificially created, with each one designed for a specific purpose as their society has need. The intimate interlinking of their minds causes them to behave as one superorganism rather than individuals. To get into why they are here, we have to understand their philosophy. Philosophy is a human word, made for human contexts, so it may not be appropriate to use that label, but I will use it anyway. They have a monistic, reductionist ontology, which bears heavy similarities to cosmopsychism, or objective idealism. As far as I can tell, their philosophy is naturalistic, but has some elements that could be misconstrued as religious. They reduce time, space, and everything to the behavior of a single, unitary consciousness, not to be confused with the superintelligence that I mentioned earlier. This consciousness behaves entirely spontaneously, without deliberation or forethought. According to them, the minds of living organisms are part of this consciousness that has looped in on itself, creating separation and individuality. The process of evolution has caused some organisms, such as ourselves, to develop higher cognitive faculties and mental complexity, which allow for complex thought and self-reflection. Our perceptions are the mental activity of this unitary consciousness, as it is filtered through our minds and presented in a way that is most advantageous to our survival as individual loops. We model the patterns of our observations as the laws of physics, but the laws of physics have no inherent existence except for the patterns of this universal mental activity. They believe that as life continues to grow and complexify, it will have an effect on the unitary consciousness that constitutes the universe. As life proliferates and complexifies, it will cause it to attain higher cognitive functions and eventually reach self-awareness. They believe that the universe is already blindly striving toward self-awareness and complexity, and they seek to move it along, so to speak. This is their goal, and is presumably why they are here on Earth. They are guiding the development of life on this planet to help serve this end. I have no clue why they are so motivated to move toward this goal, or what the actual implications would be if they succeeded. It also leads to other questions. If any of this is true, time itself is merely a construct created by this unitary consciousness. So how could it change and develop? How does this universal consciousness fragment into individual minds? And what relationship does this have to biology and the origin of life? They are not afraid of dying because they believe that death is just a process where individuality breaks down and their mind unloops and becomes reintegrated into the unitary consciousness. They believe that memories and life experiences are reabsorbed into the consciousness during this process. Perhaps this is the mechanism that allows it to develop. Whether or not this is true, it seemed to bring them a lot of peace during their tormented final moments. Even in death, they served their purpose. Their philosophy shapes the way their society is organized in profound ways. They have intentionally designed their technology in a way that integrates the mind and obscures individuality. They do not fear death, and even embrace it when they have fulfilled their purpose. They have a positive attitude toward living organisms and ecosystems, because the flourishing of life is integral to them achieving their goals. However, they do not respect individuality, and they see individuals, including themselves, and species as expendable in the service of their goals. In the interviews, they voice concern with the impact that humanity is having on life on this planet, but also see us as a step in a process of complexification. They are definitely monitoring how life is developing on this planet, and it is very probable that they are subtly manipulating it to serve their goals. The similarity between their biology and ours makes me wonder whether they seeded Earth with life to begin with. Maybe this planet has been their project from the beginning. Or probably not. My thoughts on disclosure. I've been keeping up with this topic for a while now, and despite recent events, I feel very optimistic about disclosure. This isn't the kind of thing that can be kept a secret forever. They are here to stay, and a secret this large can only be kept for so long. None of the information, at least none of that I learned during this project, is anything that would threaten civilization or cause a mass panic. People are much more resilient than that. The cat is clawing its way out of the bag, and I don't think it's going to be forced back in without tremendous effort. The important thing is that ordinary people like you keep putting up resistance and support whistleblowers. I hope that the report I helped to write eventually gets out to the public. Me and my co-workers put a lot of effort into writing it. Yeah, like I said, most of this stuff is common knowledge anyway to UFO enthusiasts, but it's still fun. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. We are woefully out of time. We'll see you again right here next week. God bless you.